week 13 of the fantasy football season. He has tight end start sits every matchup this week. Now with Thanksgiving here, it's a full slate this week. 3 games Thanksgiving, Black Friday a game, and then goes back to regular schedule. So the first game, Chicago Bears at the Detroit Lions, usually the first game every year for Thanksgiving. Saul Kmet finally had a good game last week with 13.40 fantasy points in PPR league. But this offense all season long has been inconsistent, but rightfully so, obviously with a rookie quarterback like Caleb Williams. So this week in a matchup versus a pretty good defense that's getting it going over the last few weeks in the Lions, I think Cole Kmet, we have to see a little bit more out of him to put him in the lineup each and every week. And like I said, with a full slate, he might not even crack my top 15 this week. Sam Laporta, a start. I know this season he's been a bust, especially being the number 1 tight end off the board for fantasy owners. But in this offense, I believe if you're a starting player, any week you could pop off and have a big game. The way this offense moves and gets the football down the field. So Sam Laporta, he was starting to get things going. Then he missed the week 11 ball game, the victory to Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think it slowed his momentum up a little bit. But this week, Thanksgiving, usually high-scoring games on Thursday. I think Laporta goes out there. He's a start. New York Giants at the Cowboys. Theo Johnson, he's a sit. He's banged up, limited right now, early in the practice week. But he's going to play in this game, but we really haven't seen much out of the rookie, so he's an easy sit. Jake Ferguson, if he plays, I would give him a starting nod. Cooper Rush, just like that, Dak Prescott, his best friend and security blanket, has been the tight end position so far. We saw it a few years ago when Rush filled in for Dak, and now we're seeing it once again where we saw Schoonmaker fill in for Ferguson, have a solid ball game. So if Ferguson plays, he's a start as a number 2 option in the passing game. And if he don't play, Luke Schoonmaker is going to start once again. And he had 3 catches, 55 yards, and found the end zone for the Dallas Cowboys. So he's a borderline option. Obviously, I think Ferguson is the better tight end, and he's been the starting tight end the last couple seasons for a reason. But Schoonmaker, in times this season where he's had to fill in, he's looked good, no doubt about it, but I just can't have 100% confidence in Schoonmaker, especially with every team playing. Miami Dolphins at the Packers, Jonnu Smith, he's been one of the best tight ends over the last month of the season. And right now, it looks like he might be that number 2 option in the passing game. Him and Tua are connecting, they're making plays. And defense is obviously a rolling coverage all Tyreek Hill's way. And obviously as well, Jalen Waddle's way, where John was getting the one-on-one coverage or even zone coverage. So this week in Green Bay, in a potential high-scoring game, and we saw George Kittle go out there and have a big game versus them. Jonnu Smith is a must-start weekly right now. Kraft to start. I know he had a goose egg a couple weeks ago for this Packer team, but last week he found the end zone. It just seems like every week it's somewhat different in the passing game for Green Bay. But Tucker Kraft, we know he's an athletic tight end, good yard after catch player. And this week I have confidence in him. Once again, he's a start. Vegas Raiders at the Chiefs. Brock Bowers a start for me in this one. One of the best tight ends to come out in the last 10, 15 years at the position. And he's amongst the league leaders in every stat at the position. So Aiden O'Connell looks like he's going to come back for this Black Friday game. We know Gardner Minshew's out for the season with a broken collarbone. And I think Brock Bowers goes out there in a game where they're going to be chasing points all day. And that's a good one. Travis Kelce a start. I know Travis Kelce the last couple weeks hasn't been the elite numbers for him. And Noah Gray's outplayed him, a backup tight end. But Travis Kelce in a good matchup versus a team he's got a great track record against, especially in the division in the AFC West. It's a nice game this week. Noah Gray, 4 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. He's been a nice option in the passing game where obviously teams are rolling coverage towards Travis Kelce, towards DeAndre Hopkins, trying to stop the deep ball with Xavier Worthy. And it's a lot of seam routes and yard after catch ability from Noah Gray. So right now, I think Noah Gray's a borderline option for fantasy owners. If you're banged up at the tight end position or you're one of those fantasy owners that stream the position this week in a good matchup versus the Raiders, I think he's a decent borderline option. Houston Texans at the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. I got Dalton Schultz as a sit. Dalton Schultz, I thought he would be a little bit more involved in this offense, obviously with the Stephon Diggs injury, but we really haven't seen much. And to be honest, this offense hasn't looked all that great for the most part this season. Is this Houston Texan team. So Schultz coming off a few games now in a row where we haven't seen much out of him. He's an easy sit. Evan Ingram, a start. He's arguably the number 1 option now in the passing game with Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis out for the season between him and Brian Thomas. And him and Trevor Lawrence have a great rapport. Definitely a possibility. Lawrence returns to the lineup where it looks like he's going to practice this week, where a couple weeks ago reports came out he could be out for the season, but it looks like Lawrence is going to play in this one. So Ingram a start. Chargers at the Falcons. Will Dissly a borderline option? There's some weeks he's putting up numbers, and some weeks, obviously, he's taking a backseat to the running game with Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnson. So Will Dissly with a full slate. I know it's a fast track and stuff with a pretty decent matchup versus the Falcons. I just think Will Dissly, it's tough to trust him week in and week out. It's the same thing like Cole Kmet, where some weeks they're getting targets and some weeks they're not. So this week he's borderline. Kyle Pitts a start for me in this game. Kyle Pitts, I know it's been an up and down season once again, but coming off the bye week, I think this offense is going to figure things out a little bit over there after they've lost 2 in a row. Is this Atlanta Falcon team? So Kyle Pitts, he's had some big games, and some games he hasn't shown up. But this week in a matchup versus the Chargers, where it could be back and forth, or it could even be a game that's chasing points, depending how this Charger defense comes out this week. He's a start for me. Tennessee Titans at the Washington Commanders. Chig Okonkwo, I know he had the long touchdown, but that was his only catch of the game, and it was a broken coverage where he found the end zone. So Okonkwo's an athlete, no doubt about it, but right now he hasn't been a factor all season long for this Tennessee Titan team, where Will Levis is pretty much just targeting Calvin Ridley and Westbrook-Ikhine a sit. Zach Ertz a start, number 2 option in the passing game for the Commanders. 2 weeks in a row now, 15 or more fantasy points in PPR leagues. And this week versus a Tennessee defense that hasn't stopped anyone all season long, he's a start. Arizona Cardinals at the Vikings. 2 great tight ends going at it in this ball game, and they're must starts and top 5 options weekly. Trey McBride coming off a monster game, over 130 yards receiving, double-digit receptions in that ball game, and he's the number 1 target, in my opinion, easily in the passing game for Arizona. He's a start. TJ Hawkinson a start. I know he's been back for a month now. 2 great games, 2 mediocre ball games, but this week versus Arizona, where their defense really isn't all that great, and teams are double teaming Justin Jefferson, it's opening things up for TJ Hawkinson, and I think he goes out there and has another good game this week. Indianapolis Colts at the New England Patriots. I've said this every week. They don't use the tight end position much, and if they do, it's one pop game, and then Kyle Granson, Mo Alley-Cox, whoever it is, doesn't do much for weeks on end then, and then they'll have the game here and there. So this week in a matchup in New England, this it's for the Patriots. Hunter Henry's a start. He's that number 1A, number 1B option in the offense, and Hunter Henry, he's a good route runner, and at least now he has a quarterback that could stretch the field a little bit and get him the football. So this week in a matchup versus the Colts, where their defense really hasn't been great this season, he's a start. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Cincinnati Bengals. Freiermuth, he's been playing better over the last couple weeks for this Pittsburgh Steelers team, and this week it's a great matchup at the Cincinnati Bengals, where all season long teams have been going up and down the field, scoring 30-plus points versus them. So Freiermuth and the Steelers offense, I think they have a good game this week. He's a start. Mike Gesicki a sit. When T. Higgins is in the lineup, Mike Gesicki, he really don't do much. You don't get a lot of targets, and rightfully so. When you got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, obviously, in your starting lineup, those guys are going to get open, one of them at least, almost every play that you're throwing the football down the field, where guys like Mike Gesicki and Andre Aceves, they're not going to get targets, they're not going to get looks, and that's what I've said all season long. If Higgins was out, Gesicki is a start, but with Higgins back, he's been non-existent in terms of putting up numbers. Seattle Seahawks at the Jets, not much going on at the tight end position in these ball games. Noah Fant, he's been banged up the last few weeks on and off, and even when he plays, he's that 4th or 5th option behind, obviously, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker, and A.J. Bonner. He's had a couple flashes here and there, but he's not a viable fantasy option. He's a sit. Tyler Conklin, he's had a couple good games this season, but ever since Devontae Adams got traded to the Jets, it's pretty much been him and Garrett Wilson in the passing game. So Conklin is sit. Los Angeles Rams at the New Orleans Saints, Colby Parkinson is sit. He's that 4th or 5th option in the offense as well, behind Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kyren Williams, arguably DeMarcus Robinson, and Parkinson. He's definitely a decent tight end, but when you got that firepower in the offense, these guys aren't going to get targets and much opportunity. Caesar sits. Saints, Taysom Hill is a start. We've seen over the last couple weeks, ever since Dennis Allen got fired, more plays have been called for Taysom Hill. Obviously, a lot of goal line, a lot of gadget, and he could do it all. Catch the football, throw the football a little bit, and he's very tough to tackle, especially in that shotgun and direct snap to Taysom Hill. So this week, if they're going to keep using him the way they've had over the last few weeks, is New Orleans. He's a must-start. Juwan Jennings, Forster Monroe, they've had a couple moments, a couple touchdowns here and there, but they're not viable fantasy options week in and week out. So this week, they're sit. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Carolina Panthers. Cade Otton's a start. Last week, it was a tough matchup on paper where the Giants, believe it or not, played well all season long versus tight ends, but Cade Otton's a great athlete. good tight end, big target. Number 2 option now, I believe, in the passing game behind Mike Evans, with obviously Chris Godwin, who's out for the season. He's been out multiple weeks away anyway, and we've seen on had the big games with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans out. But I know with Evans back, the numbers could go down a bit, but this week in a good matchup at the Panthers that got torched by Noah Gray, he's a start. Ja'Tavion Sanders is a sit. This is still a youth movement over there in Carolina, and there's going to be growing pains. But Sanders, he's definitely showed some flashes. But this week, we have to see more out of him weekly to be a start. He's a sit. Philadelphia Eagles at the Baltimore Ravens. Dallas Goedert locked in as a start for me. I know he's going to have inconsistent weeks being that 3rd or 4th option in the offense, but he's still a solid tight end, yard after catch, big target, especially in the red zone is where he gets a lot of his fantasy points, is Dallas Goedert. And this week in a potential high-scoring ball game at the Ravens, he's a start. Mark Andrews a start. I know some weeks he's going to be non-existent and he's not going to put up fantasy points, but then there's weeks we've seen Mark Andrews have big ball games, and he still is the number 2 target in the passing game for me, is Andrews. So this week in a potential high-scoring game, even though he's versing a good defense of the Eagles, he's a start. Isaiah Likely's a borderline option of me. Some weeks he has good ball games, and some weeks his numbers are non-existent. So this Raven offense, it's very tricky who to start week in and week out at these positions. Besides Zay Flowers, no one else is locked in Rashad Bateman or Deontay Johnson, or even Andrews. So this week, Andrews is a start. Like Sunday night, San Francisco 49ers at the Bills. George Kittle locked in as a top 3-4 option weekly at the tight end position. He returned last week. He had a big game, even though it was a blowout loss at the Green Bay Packers. And this week in a matchup in Buffalo, well, I feel like this is a must-win ball game for San Francisco, where they're free-falling now at 5-6 on the season. Kittle, I think, goes out there and he has a good game. He's a start. Dalton Kincaid, I believe he's going to return off injury, is Kincaid, because he missed the Week 11 game, and now the rest during the bye as well should get him to almost full health. And Kincaid, he's a freak athlete. He was a first-round pick in the NFL draft last season for a reason, and he was the number 2 option in this passing game before he went down. So I like him as a start in the final game of the week, Monday night, Cleveland Browns at the Denver Broncos. David Njoku, I've said this a lot, he's one of the best athletes at the tight end position. Him and Jameis Winston have a good rapport, and David Njoku would have had a nice game last week, but he dropped the ball in the end zone, and with all that snow coming down, it's tough at times to catch the football with the slickness and obviously those heavy snowflakes in your face. I believe this week he bounces back, obviously, is David Njoku, as long as no snow in the forecast at Denver, even though this time of year it obviously snows there in the mountains. But anyway, I think Njoku, he's a start pretty much weekly as a top 12, 15 option, worst case. Adam Trautman, he's a sit, not really the tight end getting featured at all in this offense. And pretty much this offense is about Courtland Sutton mixing it between the 3 running backs over there. And now Devon Vele getting into the mix with Bo Nix running the football himself as well. So Trautman, he's had 1 or 2 pop games all season long and not a recommended start. He's a sit this week, so that's tight end start sit every matchup for week 13 of the fantasy football season.